Role-playing games. Bro, what the fuck? What makes role-playing games the best genre in gaming is the fact that you get transported into a fantasy world filled with all kinds of stories to tell and experiences to be had, while you yourself being either this fictional character that is made by the devs, or an alternate version of yourself that either looks like you, or is the most hideous abomination of all of mankind or creature kind. And boy oh boy, there are so many fantastic worlds to explore in RPG games, both vast and linear. And if you've clicked in this video, then you at least somewhat agree with the aforementioned statement of RPGs being so great, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows, unfortunately, as some games just release in such a buggy state that in many ways it ends up ruining the immersion for most players picking up the game for the first time or returning to it to try and enjoy it. With some games, admittedly, it might just be a case of it not being good enough, simply put, in the player's own subjective eyes, but that does not stop the devs from trying to win players back after the initial damage has already been done. For some games though, they end up living in this perpetual life of limbo where they might have already been fixed and run in play way better than they did at launch, but unfortunately are still massively hated. I hope massively is a real word. They're hated by the mass, that's what I'm trying to say. Now with all that being said, there are clear exceptions to this, like games like Cyberpunk and No Man's Sky, for example. They have since seen universal praise and love being thrown at them, similarly to how I throw money at every Monster Hunter DLC. That got me wondering, so of course here's a video of 4 games that launched in a somewhat of a buggy state, to say the very least, and have since been updated and fixed to a point where they are in fact very much more enjoyable and worthwhile RPGs to play and sink your ever so omnivorously dull teeth into. Now do keep in mind that first of all, this is my list and my subjective opinion on the matter, and I do hope you let me know in the comments down below what you think of this list, as well as your own list of 4 additional games. So without any more filler, subscribe if you're new and let's get on with the first game, that is the ever so loved and not so loved Bethesda giant that is Starfield. Now a lot can be said about Starfield, and similar words have been said about rented mules in all honesty. And now while a lot that was said at launch were valid, and I do have to agree with that, as the game was just buggy, had performance issues, and overall just felt unfinished, Starfield has since launch seen huge improvements in terms of performance and overall bugginess. Add to that the added features such as a buggy, pun intended, as well as mod support and a map for starters, on top of the quality of life additions and changes that make for a much more enjoyable and finished feeling game. Granted, if you thought the original game was boring, then the added features and the new DLC won't most likely change your opinion on the game, but for players that have been waiting for a kind of launch off point to play the game for the first time or finally return to it, now is the perfect time to jump into the settled systems, broski. But I personally think the base game was fun, even if a bit outdated in terms of mechanics, because well, it's an ancient game engine, but that's a whole other video for a whole other topic. So instead I want to kind of raise the point of enjoyment that there is to be had in this game, because Starfield is at its best if you enjoy questing and the exploration and looting that comes with it. It's not one of those games where you see something in the distance and go out to explore different POIs, but instead the game actually wants you to just talk to people and hear the different stories it has to tell in its vast universe. At least that's where I think the game excels most of all, is in the questing and the stories, because this is one of those chill games that you just sit back and play for hours and then go away and then return again and play for another bunch of hours. I just loved hopping on the game and doing random side quests. So if you like those types of games, and then now is the perfect time of course to become a member of Constellation, not only by subscribing to this channel, but also, like, I don't know, broski, installing the freaking game for yourself and playing it, of course. Now following up one of the most opinion splitting games in recent memory, I have another game that splits hairs and opinions similar to how Moses did it in the hit movie Prince of Egypt, and that game is Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, on top of the launch issues that this game had, the game came with microtransactions, and boy oh boy did it cause a ruckus. Also add to that the overall feeling that this game was more of a continuation of the original Dragon's Dogma rather than an actual sequel. Dragon's Dogma 2 is, in every sense of the word, a literal sequel by just giving you more of the original game, which, surprise surprise, for lack of better wording, ran like absolute hot garbage at launch. It has thankfully since seen a numerous numerous amount of patches and fixes to make the game overall not only run and feel better, and I can also say that quite literally because now you can actually run outside of combat or in safe places without expending stamina, which is a widely requested feature. But overall, in terms of combat and everything that there is in the game, it's much more of an enjoyable RPG experience now than it was at launch. Now, one could just hate on the game because of de novo or a numerous amount of other reasons that people were very happy to tell me about in the comments section of that video, but I personally think the core gameplay experience in Dragon's Dogma 2 is up there with the very best that RPGs have to offer, especially in like this fantasy kind of monster-y setting. You want get to fight huge mythical monsters and explore a world that is more on the hardcore side of things because of its reliance on exploration over just clicking a map to fast travel. Also, things like weight management, stamina and health management, and some really nice inventory management things as well, like expiring foods and all of this good stuff, make for a very memorable experience that is well worth exploring now once the game has seen, like I said, a bunch of quality of life fixes and additions. Dragon's Dogma 2 is a slow burner of a game, admittedly, and it relies quite heavily on exploration and players' own experiences instead of the actual questing in the game, contrary to what I said about Starfield earlier. Now, with that being said, there are a bunch of quests and the story is okay, but this game is at its very best when you're out there in the world just surviving and fighting griffins, ogres, cyclops, and freaking dragons, broski. It's just so awesome. And I know someone in the comments is gonna be like, actually, they're drakes and not dragons. But bro, who cares? Honestly. Who cares? This game offers a solid 60 to 100 hours of gameplay for those willing to give it a chance. So pray, Arisen, may thou enjoyeth the game once thine have been fixed. Please don't click away because of that. Anyway, let's move on with the list. As the third game on the list, we have Lords of the Fallen, the remake of the original Lords of the Fallen, which, well, no lords really fell in that game because it sucked ass and no one played it. So they said, scratch that, let's just remake the whole game. And while they did remake the game and it was received way better than the original in both sales numbers and players' opinions, but boy oh boy, the numerous bugs and performance issues at launch really stopped the game from really hitting the heights and being all that enjoyable, if I'm being very honest. Now, this was one of those games that I personally had to put down after like 5-ish hours of playing it because of the state of the game, and it's just not feeling fun for me personally. But after a while, after a few months, I was coerced into jumping back into the game. Man, I am so happy that I did jump back because now it was super enjoyable and worthwhile. On top of the bug fixes and performance fixes, the game has since seen a bunch of quality of life improvements as well, on top of added settings like a boss rush run mode and balance fixes across the board. So now not everyone is using holy as their source of magic. Lords of the Fallen now feels like a great Souls-like game that begs to be played. Regarding my casual-ish experience with it, I do have to say that it's one of those games where once you give into it and actually play it the way that the game wants you to play it, if that makes any sense, instead of playing it like just another Elden Ring, then this is where the game just shines. There's some extremely interesting concepts to it with how the Umbral works, on top of the lore and overall setting and the visuals, which look awesome. This is one of the better Souls-like games out there, and now that it has been fixed, I would like to say completely, probably, is well worth experiencing, broski. On top of everything, you can even get it for dirt cheap nowadays because it's been out for such a long time, and you can get the kind of definitive edition of the game, which is amazing. So now at long last is the perfect time to kind of jump into this game, and this is kind of the perfect launch off point to playing it because they're making a sequel, so you don't want to miss out. Now, last but definitely not least is a game that launched in a working state, admittedly, which is very contrary to why I made this video, but it's just void of content in general and has an absolutely amazing combat style that relies on speed and momentum, and that's of course Atlas Fallen Reign of Sand. Now, Atlas Fallen Reign of Sand, and I said that twice already, is admittedly the kind of definitive version of the game, but what it adds to the game is interesting as less games do these kinds of changes, especially a year after release. Now, what the game has now is new challenges in the open world, changes to the progression and pacing, as well as changes to the leveling system. And one huge change, which is the main voice actor of the game, has completely been changed. I say changed so many freaking times. I was genuinely surprised that the devs went back and did such huge changes again without having the early access tag slapped on a game, and instead just gave out a free update that changes, god damn it, a bunch of things. Now these beep things doesn't make the game a game of the year contender in any way, shape or form, broski, but what it does is make the moment-to-moment gameplay much more enjoyable, and boy oh boy is the combat fun. The momentum system in the game sees you play the game like some kind of RPG Devil May Cry hybrid that is super hectic but also super fun to enjoy. This is one of those games that will more than likely be on numerous lists of underrated RPG games, with, well, this video being one of them, of course. But with all the fixes, all the added content and changes, it's a worthwhile game to experience, especially since, first of all, it's dirt cheap, but also it doesn't really last 50 plus hours to finish like some of the other games on this list. So one could call it a RPG light of sorts. It also has character customization, if that matters to anyone. It's very limited, but on top of that, it has one of the cooler traversal systems I've seen in games, as you get to surf on sand and jump and swoosh around the air, which is absolutely fun and amazing. Now, if you do want to get the lowdown on what the f Atlas Fallen actually is, then click this video right here, wait, they're right there, to see what the f that game actually is and if it's any fun to play. And would you look at that, I also made videos on the other games on this list as well, so do check them out. Links to them are either on screen right now or in the description box below. But again, man, this has been me. These have been my opinions on these games, and that they deserve second chances. Now, I do want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think of these games? If there are other fixes you would see to make these games even better, as well as, you know, letting me know your list of games that you would like to see, either in this future video that I make a sequel. I'm rambling on for so long, but whatever. But these have only been on my opinion, of course. You can do whatever the f you want. I've been your broski. I hope you did enjoy the video. If you did, be sure to click that like button, man. Subscribe to the channel. We are growing so nicely, so I'd love to have you on board the train of broskis. No, that sounds so wrong when I say it like that. But in any case, I hope you guys have a great day wherever you're from, whichever time of day you watch this at. I don't know how to end this video, so here's a meme that I think of while editing this video. Hasta prontissimo.